Colleagues, welcome back to our study on clause by clause in Bill C-65. As always, a friendly reminder that when your earpieces are not in use, that they are on the stickers that are presented in front of us on the table. I know that Mr. Morris is attempting to join us, so we're not going to wait for him, but just to note that he will appear online shortly. So, colleagues, we're just going to get right into it, and we're going to pick up where we left off, which means that Mr. Cooper had introduced a sub-amendment. You'll recall that we had a sub-amendment that we debated. It was defeated. Mr. Cooper introduced a new sub-amendment, and that is what we are currently on. So, do you have a question, Mr. Duncan?
On the speaking list after Mr. Cooper.
On the speaking list? Okay. Mr. Calkins, Mr. Berthold, okay. Yeah, everybody should have the sub-amendment.
J'ai des copies. J'ai des copies.
Okay. Yeah. Everybody else is clear on the sub-amendment? Okay, mais les autres membres? Ouais, mais vous avez...
And the other members, do you have a copy? Ms. Gaudreau?
Okay, we'll just give it a sec for staff here to distribute. Okay, Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will just read into the record the motion before us, which is a sub-amendment, and it reads as follows, that motion NDP 2 proposing to amend Clause 5, Bill C-65 be amended by adding the following after TION. However, the first general election after this section comes into force is to be held on the later of A, Monday, February 24th, 2025, and B, subject to subsection 3, the Monday following the 50th day after the day on which this section comes into force, 3, for the purpose of paragraph 2B, if the Monday referred to in that paragraph is a holiday, polling day shall be held on the Tuesday after that Monday, and any time specified under this Act before or after polling day is to be calculated as if polling day were the Monday. Mr. Chair, I want to provide at the outset some context to why we have put forward this sub-amendment. It goes back to what the clause in this bill, Bill C-65, that secures the pensions of soon-to-be defeated Liberal and NDP MPs. This government sold this bill as an elections bill. But we now know that the real purpose of this bill is to protect the pensions of Liberal and NDP MPs. We know that Canadians have had enough of this Prime Minister. He is the most unpopular Prime Minister in decades. The leader of the NDP is not much more popular, having propped up this government for more than 2 years, propping up a government that has made life more expensive, that has increased taxes on Canadians, that has fueled inflation, and a government that is ridden with corruption and conflict from top to bottom.
Not to interrupt Mr. Cooper's little rage farming clickbait, tantrum, but I just wanted to ask for clarification around this. It looks like it's substantively similar to the previous sub-amendment. I think we already had a ruling on that, if I'm not mistaken, from the last meeting.
Yeah, that's correct.
But I wanted to just understand the rationale behind the decision, because when I read this over, in black and white in front of me, it just seems to be substantively the same. So I'd just like to ask for clarification on that so that I understand the rationale. Thanks.
Mr. Turnbull, I think for clarity, sometimes the chair will provide their own explanation after seeking advice. In this case, I'm just going to go to the ledge clerks directly. I think it might be helpful for us to hear the rationale that they provided to me, which was the basis of my judgment. So I'm going to turn it over to them for a moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. After reviewing both sub-amendments, we came to the conclusion that we felt it was that they were substantively different because of the fact that the second sub-amendment introduces different options, in this case, 2 options. So that's why we felt it was substantively different to be considered admissible.
So the options are A, B, A and B is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so because it introduces options, that's what makes it substantively different?
In our opinion.
In your opinion, yeah. Okay. All right, and then that was supported by the ruling of the chair. So, Chair, you ruled that it was. So I'd like to challenge the chair, even though I know you're our chair or one of the chairs, but I'd like to challenge that ruling of the chair. I don't think it's substantively different enough, and I believe that this is a repeat debate, and it's an opportunity for the Conservatives to filibuster and waste the committee's time once again with officials here.
Point of order.
So just one moment. Mr. Duncan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm questioning how, maybe through the clerk, can somebody challenge the chair 2 days later? I mean, if the ruling was made at the meeting the other day, Mr. Turnbull should have raised it at that point and been dealt with. We're now in the meeting the next day, 2 days later, having been told and having not been challenged. So I believe it is too late, and it is not reasonable that we now have a challenge to the chair because Mr. Turnbull doesn't like it. If he didn't like it, he should have done it at the meeting 2 days ago.
To that point of order, Chair?
You're not recognized.
Just time out. Thanks. Suspended.
On a point of order, Mr. Bertrand, just wait a sec.
Sur le même appel de...
On the same point of order, but before I suspended, it was Mr. Turnbull who had the floor. So I'm going to give Mr. Turnbull the floor.
Yeah, I was just going to say that my understanding was that it came at the very last moment of the last meeting. So this would be the earliest opportunity I've had to bring this up. The ruling that was made was right before you adjourned the last meeting. I did not have an opportunity in that last meeting to express my disappointment with the ruling of the chair on this particular matter.
Okay, I've heard you, Mr. Turnbull. Thank you, Monsieur Berthad.
Juste pour ajouter, Monsieur.
I just want to say, with respect to the situation, that the earliest opportunity to do this would have been would have been before you allowed the debate to begin. As soon as the debate got underway, the ruling that you gave, well, it was too late to challenge it because you enabled the debate to get underway. So Mr. Turnbull missed the opportunity. Thank you for your thoughts on this.
The same point of order, I would cite Bosque and Gagnon, in which it states to appeal a decision by a chair, a member must inform the committee of his or her intent immediately after the decision is announced. Now, the decision was announced at the last meeting. Mr. Turnbull did not challenge your ruling then. The meeting was adjourned. The meeting reconvened moments ago.
2 days later?
2 days later. At no time in those 2 days did Mr. Turnbull indicate any intention to challenge the chair. Debate. I read the motion, the sub-amendment again.
So, Mr. Cooper, not to cut you off, I think I've heard the arguments. Mr. Turnbull, I think I've heard the arguments. I've consulted with the ledge clerks here, and there is agreement, and I share the agreement, that the amount of time that passes between meetings is not what's actually relevant. What's relevant is that there is time at a meeting. I did adjourn immediately following the introduction of the sub-amendment by Mr. Cooper, which means that, in all fairness, it did not provide members of the committee an opportunity to speak to it or object to it. And so for that reason, in consultation with the experts that I have beside me here, I am going to allow the challenge. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a vote on this now.
I'm going to challenge the chair. I'm going to challenge the chair on your ruling about when it is permissible to challenge. I'm sorry. If 2 days ago at the meeting was adjourned, Mr. Cooper clearly laid out that there was opportunity. He had recommitted, he restarted, he was in the debate, and Mr. Turnbull said at that point that he didn't like this and thought it was already dealt with. He had the copy of the sub-amendment. He had all of it. He could have taken the floor, and he did not. So he did not follow the rules and challenge the chair at the first opportunity. So whether it was the other meeting or not, so I think I'm going to challenge the chair on the interpretation of being able to challenge the chair within a reasonable manner.
Fair, that's fair enough, Mr. Duncan. What I just need to do now is figure out procedurally how we move forward in terms of dealing with these two challenges. So just one moment, please. So, colleagues, you cannot challenge a challenge. You can't have a challenge within a challenge. So this is a dilatory motion in the sense that, or decision rather, in the sense that we're going to go right to a vote. So I'm just going to explain what's happening here. The vote is to determine whether or not my ruling previously that the sub-amendment was admissible, whether my ruling that the sub-amendment was admissible is in fact worthy of being upheld or not. That's what we're voting on. Okay, so I call the question to the clerk. Clerk, perhaps you can also explain in your own language, just so we're very clear here.
So the question is that the chair decision be sustained, que la décision de la présidence soit.
That the ruling of the chair be sustained.
Yeah, the decision on
The admissibility,
of the sub-amendment. So the chair ruled that the sub-amendment is in order. All right? Okay.
Okay, we'll call the question.
Okay. Mr. Turnbull?
No.
Madame Romanado?
No.
Ms. O'Connell?
No.
Madame Fortier?
No.
Monsieur Drouin? Monsieur Berthold? Mr. Calkins?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes?
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Madame Gaudreau?
Oui.
Ms. Barron?
Sorry, I'm getting it flipped to my brain now. So, no, I don't agree with the decision of the chair. Thank you.
Just one second, Michael.
Yeas 5, nays 6.
So colleagues, yeah, I'll come to your point of order, Mr. Duncan, in just a moment once I explain to committee members what's happened here. So what's happened is the chair's decision has been overruled, which means that we would fall back to debate on NDP 2. Mr. Duncan on a point of order. And then I see Ms. Barron, and I've got Mr. Cooper.
On challenging the chair, my understanding is that I could not challenge the chair regarding a challenge to the chair. But now that it has been dealt with and there's not one on the table, I would like to challenge your decision now, see if that is possible to do so. I do not believe it's appropriate. We've clearly laid out what the rules were, and that Mr. Turnbull did not
So, Mr.
take
Duncan,
the opportunity at the right time.
not to cut you off, but we can't have a challenge on something that's been dealt with already. So the committee has, through its will of a majority vote, determined what it would like to do on this. So we are back on NDP 2 at this point. I have Ms. Barron and Mr. Cooper, and then Mr. Turnbull. Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Barron. The floor is yours. Just to be clear, colleagues, we are back on NDP 2 here.
Thank you, Chair. I guess first and foremost, I'm happy that we're back on track here on the topic of us actually putting forward a resolution to the problem that continues to be brought forward by my Conservative colleagues. Mr. Chair, again, we have a solution to the problem. And instead of voting in favor of the solution, the Conservatives are finding every way to be able to filibuster this committee, to be able to get the clips that they want, to be able to fundraise immediately, even during this committee. And so this is another example. I can guarantee as soon as I stop talking, there's going to be another sub-amendment that's going to be brought forward and another sub-amendment that's going to be brought forward, each one of them as illegitimate as the one before. And each sub-amendment is going to be talking about, I can guarantee, the pensions of members of Parliament. And so the thing is about this is that we actually know that those who benefit the most from this component, this part, this clause in the bill, is the Conservative members of Parliament. I find it very convenient that the Conservative members of Parliament are sitting here fundraising, saying that this is a bill that only benefits members of Parliament's pensions, yet they're doing absolutely nothing to actually resolve the issue. As a matter of fact, they're doing the opposite of resolving the issue. They are purposely sabotaging the ability for this issue to be resolved. And now, again, Mr. Chair, I never, ever, ever like to put intentions in any of my colleagues, attach intentions to any one of my colleagues. However, I would like to point out the facts. The majority of Conservative members of Parliament are those who benefit from this remaining in this bill. Today, the last meeting, the meeting before, and probably the meeting that comes up next, we're going to see members of Parliament from the Conservative Party sabotaging the ability for this committee to be able to resolve the issue. It seems a little convenient to me, Mr. Chair. And so today, again, I'm so happy that we're back at Clause 5, which is the motion that I put forward, that my NDP colleagues and I put forward together to resolve this issue. And again, I will reiterate, around this table, we have the Bloc Québécois has said that they are in support. The Liberals have said that they are in support. And the ironic part about this is the Conservatives have also said they are in support of us making these changes. So what is happening here? How can you say one thing and do the opposite. Well, apparently that's what the Conservatives can do over and over and over again. Here we are again. I would love to be able to read out all the sub-amendments that we already have handy because we know they're coming. And I would love to be able to tear apart the fact that there is actually no difference between any of those sub-amendments. And so I actually hope that the Conservatives can bring them forward. And my hope is that we can, as a committee, look at those sub-amendments and figure out, is there actually a difference between any of these sub-amendments? I can guarantee there is not. The root of each one of these sub-amendments is how do we sabotage a bill that is looking at improving our electoral systems, that is looking at ensuring that we have elections that are strong, that is barrier-free, and that we are putting into place the solutions that so many who showed up as witnesses here at this committee told us about. Issues around barriers for those living with disabilities to be able to cast a ballot, issues surrounding seniors being able to vote in long-term care homes. We have issues where the dates are too narrowly, we need to see it extended to have more dates that people can show up at the ballots to cast their ballot. We know people are busy. We know people are working. We know people have schedules that are moving in so many pieces in this busy world that we're in. We need to have that flexibility so that people can show up at the ballots. We need to have clear repercussions when there's false information being spread in order to deter people from being able to show up at the ballots. We don't have another Conservative robocall scandal happening. We need to make sure that we have the processes in place to protect our electoral system. Now, again, I will agree with the Conservatives with the frustration on this component of the bill that speaks to the MP pensions. And you know what I did as a result of those frustrations? I found a solution, Mr. Chair. Found a solution. Immediately upon this being brought to my attention, I found a solution. I stood up in the House. I clearly articulated the fact that I would not be supporting this component of the bill. Right after I stood up in the House of Commons, reacting to the fact that I stood up in the House of Commons, suddenly we had a Conservative member standing up, who's here today, and talking about burning the entire bill down. This entire House down. This Conservative Party, they do not want to see anything being done in the House of Commons. They just want to see the place being burnt down. So it makes sense that they would not want to see this bill move forward that actually improves our electoral systems. Because you know what? If we actually had barriers reduced and actually had voters that were engaged and felt that their votes were counted, that they were making a difference. If we actually had the systems in place to give Canadians the confidence that we are strengthening our electoral system and people showed up at the polls at the numbers that we should be having, do you know who wouldn't win? It wouldn't be the Conservatives. We know if we had an opportunity to increase to have everyday people showing up at the polls and not just those who have profits at stake, we know that the Conservative Party would be at a loss. And so, you know, Mr. Chair, there is so much that we could be talking about right now. I cannot begin to express how frustrated I am that we are just sitting here listening to the Conservatives doing their fundraising pitches on division, on hate, on disengaging Canadians from our electoral system. I don't want to be sitting here and talking about all these things over and over again. We've heard all of them. The way that we move together on a path forward is by putting forward a solution and supporting the solution to remedy the problem that has been identified in the bill. This particular amendment that I put forward does exactly that. And so I don't know what else we can do other than sit here. The Conservatives are basically holding us all hostage, holding taxpayers' money. This is publicly funded, us being here, the translators that are being used, the time, the space. The Conservatives are costing taxpayers money in order to waste our time. And so I am frustrated. I'm frustrated for Canadians. I'm frustrated for all of us that instead of putting forward a solution that could have been quick, it could have been done by now, and we could have been talking about how do we improve this bill. If there's other issues with this bill, let's talk about it. let's go through it piece by piece and see if we could come together with some solutions to how do we move forward in strengthening our democratic systems. This is our job as elected officials, is to come together. We can have different perspectives. That's okay. We can have different ways of looking at how to strengthen our electoral system. That's okay. But we need to lean on the experts in the field to get their recommendations. We need to lean on those who have lived experience in having challenges in reaching the polls. And we need to come together, share our concerns, share the positive solutions that we know that are out there, and put together a bill that will benefit Canadians. This doesn't seem like all that big of an ask. You think that this would be a very foundational piece of our work for us to be doing exactly this. And so, Mr. Chair, I hesitate to give up the floor because I'm really tired of listening to the Conservatives' hate and division and disengagement of Canadians across the country. The second I give up this floor, another sub-amendment is going to be put
Okay,
forward.
so colleagues, there's been a lot of chatter, which leads me to believe that maybe everyone's got to take a little bit of a deep breath. So I'm just going to suspend here for a moment and let everybody get a glass of water, and we'll go from there. Okay, suspended. I am just going to ask before giving the floor back to Ms. Barron. There was a fair amount of crosstalk. I know this is affectionately referred to as silly season because members are tired. We've been working night and day, and therefore the tensions can increase. I would just ask that we do our best to perhaps mumble our comments a little bit more quietly and allow for a more respectful flow of conversation. With that, Ms. Barron, I turn the floor back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So back on to this amendment. There's so many things for us to go over. I mean, I could just spend the next week just explaining facts that are completely contradictory to almost everything that the Conservatives have said since we started debating on this. But I'm really trying not to stoop to their level. What is it? Is it Michelle Obama who says that when they go low, you go high? I don't remember the saying, but I'm really trying to not follow in the footsteps of a poor example as to how we use taxpayers' money and how do we best move forward. I also think that it's important that we have some facts because we're going to sit here and have all of these filibuster, any chance that the Conservatives can in order to filibuster to be able to talk about ways in which they can increase division, to filibuster, they will certainly do that. And so, I'm not going to speak for too long, but I will share a few things that I think it's important for us to consider as a committee. The first thing, Mr. Chair, I want to reiterate again. I know that the Conservatives aren't big on paying attention to media that has any legitimacy to it whatsoever. But I'm just going to read this is a public article. This one is from CTV News, published again on May the 30th, 2024. And I do think that there's some interesting facts in here. On May the 30th, 2024, it says on here, it starts with the federal New Democrats want to amend the Liberal government's electoral reform legislation to scrap the proposal to push back the vote by a week and consequently secure pensions for dozens of MPs, CTV News has learned. So this is interesting because it does contradict what we are hearing from the Conservative members. It goes on to say it is it says on here, okay, so it's quoting me here. It says, as a perk of the date change, it says it is a perk of the date change, NDP MP and the party's Democratic Institutions critic Lisa Marie Barron, that's me, says it doesn't look good in the broader context of Canadians' cost of living concerns. And then I went on to say, I haven't actually read this since May, so I'm as surprised as you are. Let's see what else I said. I've had constituents and Canadians bring this to my attention, and I just want to make very clear that right now is not the time for members of Parliament to be thinking about their own financial gain. Well, that coincides with everything that I've been saying, she said in an interview. We want to make sure that we're very clear from the onset around the necessary amendments for us to move forward on this. So again, proposing some solutions. It goes on to talk about 80 MPs stand to benefit, and I find this interesting. I think it's good for us to really talk about what this means for members around this table. It says on the next page here, it says the Conservative Party has the highest number of MPs who would benefit by being able to qualify for a pension should they lose their seats in the next election, with 32 of their MPs first elected in 2019. It goes on in here, it says, this is an interesting point. There are 22 Liberal MPs, 19 Bloc Québécois MPs, and then it says more than half of their caucus, and 6 NDP MPs elected in 2019 who would be among those standing to secure pensions if they were defeated in 2025. Now, I think this is important. It goes on to say Barron, who's me again, elected in 2021, is not one of them. Interesting. That contradicts as well. Neither is, it goes on to say, neither is NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, as he secured his seat in a 2019 federal by-election months before the general election. Interesting. Again, also contradicts. Let's see here if there's anything else. It goes on to say, on here, I think this is a different article from the Canadian Press. It says NDP MP Lisa Barron rises during question period in the House of Commons in Parliament Hill. I could go on. There's information here that clearly shows the decision to remedy this problem and to stand in the House of Commons to get all members of Parliament on board with this. Again, I cannot reiterate that immediately upon this problem being identified, I spoke with members of the Bloc Québécois, I spoke with members of the Liberal Party, and spoke with members of the Conservative Party who all agreed that this is a problem. And I was putting forward a solution that we could have already resolved by now. It could be, at this point in time, Mr. Chair, an issue that's already been resolved. Canadians could have the peace of mind right now of knowing that this issue's been resolved, that this particular bill would not, this piece of legislation would not benefit members of Parliament's pensions, and instead we could be having a conversation about the components of the bill that actually moves us in the right direction. But no, because of the fact that the Conservatives...
Ms. Barron, I'm just going to interrupt for one sec because I see Mr. Morris has his hand up, and I just want to make sure that it's not on a point of order. Okay. Mr. Morris, just for future reference, should you have a point of order, feel free to just interject on your audio. But you do have a hand up. Okay. Is that because you want to be added to the list, or is that a mistaken hand?
I think he's waving.
We'd just like to be added to the list.
Added to the list. Okay, not a problem, Mr. Morris. I will do that. Ms. Barron, is
Thank
this
you,
a
Chair.
point of order?
It is nice to see
Sorry,
my
Ms. Barron,
colleague-
just
thank
one
you.
moment.
Yes, of course.
Mr. Duncan?
Point of order. Can we just get an update on the speaking
Yeah,
order?
so the speaking list goes Ms. Barron, Mr. Cooper, Mr. Turnbull, Mr. Morris.
We're all on there.
I had you on there from the sub-amendment. I did not have you on here on the main motion.
I'm glad I had a point of order. I'd like to get on there, please. Thank
Okay, I will add you to the list following. Who would like to go first, Mr. Skalkins or Mr. Duncan? Wonderful. Okay. Ms. Barron, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Seeing my colleague MP Morris here as well, I do want to also reiterate and clarify a point that I had not thought of until this moment, is the fact that I'm pretty sure the Greens are also on board with us having this issue resolved. I'm seeing head nodding, and because I don't like to put words in anybody else's mouths, recognizing he's probably never going to get an opportunity to speak because the Conservatives will continue again to filibuster once I stop speaking. I do want to reiterate that the Green Party has also made it very clear that they are not in support of this. And, they actually, I know that my colleague, Mr. Morris, was elected at the same time as me in 2021 and would also not stand to benefit from this, but is also making the decision to not put MP pensions at the forefront at a time when Canadians are struggling to make ends meet. I will allow him the space to speak, hopefully, and support him in doing so at his turn. But, just seeing Mr. MP Morris here really reiterates to me how united we are in seeing this issue resolved, and reminds me of how frustrating it is. And I don't know if my colleague that is now here has been watching the series of events that has been unfolding in this committee, where the Conservatives have been using any possible opportunity to sabotage any movement in a positive direction on this bill, and in fact are instead using this as an opportunity to divide Canadians, to provide them the clips that they need to be able to fill their bank account in time for the next election, to be able to spread more information. It's this vicious cycle of misinformation that's being spread out by the Conservatives. And this bill, and them calling this nothing but an MP pension bill, sure does benefit them. I would love to hear from the Conservatives how much money they have fundraised off this misinformation from the very onset. And I would love for them to explain to Canadians across the country who are providing them with these funds based on this misinformation, why in fact they are providing false information. There's no fact behind this because of the fact that we have this amendment in front of us that clearly articulates a solution to the problem. I'm offering an opportunity for all of us to come together and to resolve this issue once and for all. As a matter of fact, Mr. Chair, I brought forward a unanimous consent motion prior to us moving to this amendment that called on all members of Parliament to bring to a vote this amendment, not even debating it at the beginning. At first, it was just calling it to a vote because I know we'd already made clear our stance on this. And so, no, why not use this as an opportunity for us to bring it to a vote and to have this remedied once and for all? Of course, as expected, the Conservatives voted against. The Conservatives voted against us resolving the issue around the MP pensions. Now, again, that CTV article, how many Conservative members of Parliament benefit from these pensions remaining in this bill? Well, quite a few. And so it's pretty interesting that they are not wanting to move forward on this. Now, another thing I wanted to bring up, which is completely interconnected with this amendment that I brought forward, is the interesting piece. And now, again, I can't even begin to pretend like I know what's going on in the Conservatives' minds. I'm going to acknowledge there's a lot more of them than there are of me, and they have a well-oiled machine happening of people behind the scenes that are in the process of figuring out ways to silence me and make sure that this does not come forward. But there was a motion that came forward by my colleague, Mr. Cooper, talking about the transparency of documents, making sure that the information as to how this bill was constructed is brought forward. And the interesting thing is that this was, again, a huge fundraising opportunity for the Conservatives to talk about the corruption and the everything happening behind the scenes. But as soon as I mentioned to the Conservatives that I was in support of this bill, crickets. There's nothing happening on this particular motion, I should say, not bill, anymore. Now that the Conservatives know that I agree, I'm perfectly okay with providing all the information that I had. Do you want to know why? Because if they would like a actual copy of the report from the Chief Electoral Officer, well, that's all the information right in there. All the points that we talk about in C65, you can actually look right in the recommendations of the report from the Chief Electoral Officer, and you can see them directly coinciding with one another. I'd be happy, because I know we had some success in getting the Conservatives to agree for us to move to this particular amendment last time I read through the Chief Electoral Officer report. So perhaps I could do some more reading through there and see if the Conservatives would be willing to change their mind again on it. But I just want to reiterate the ways in which there are things coming forward based on opportunistic ways of fundraising. This motion here around transparency just sits on the side now. Nothing's happening with it. If they'd like to bring it forward, I'd be happy to provide them with the information that I'm apparently keeping secret. The unanimous consent motion for us to bring this to a vote so that we can finally have the issue around the MP pensions resolved. Well, the Conservatives voted against, and now we're in the amendment to once again resolve this issue, but instead the Conservatives are filibustering. I hope Canadians are paying attention and that they are noticing the pattern of behavior when the Conservatives are the ones that benefit the most from keeping this portion in the bill around MP pensions. I would love to also get a list of names, actually, and find out if there are any MPs in the Conservative Party that benefit directly at this table. I don't know. That's something that I'll definitely have to look into. Maybe Canadians can also look into that. On that note, Mr. Chair, there are many reasons why I feel that this bill is vitally important for us to move forward with. I have the honor of being in this position because I was elected by people in Nanaimo Ladysmith to represent them, to keep my values intact, and to ensure that our electoral system is strong for future elections. I can't determine the outcome of the next election. That'll be up to constituents in my riding of Nanaimo Ladysmith. But I can assure you my job is to make sure that I'm doing the work to have our electoral system as strong as possible for whatever the outcome is of the next election. And many of the components of this bill that have been brought forward that we heard from witnesses about. Adding 2 additional days of advance polling. I talked about this, about the barriers in people being able to cast their ballot based on the busy schedules that we have. There's often weather. We have extreme weather because of the climate crisis, which the Conservatives, of course, don't believe in. But because of the climate crisis, we often have extreme weather. It's good to have additional options. The mail-in ballots, Mr. Chair, is another component of this bill that is also a component that is being improved upon. We know that there are delays in the mail-in ballots that occur. Having a system that's more effective in being able to count those ballots and for people to be able to use those ballots is important. One barrier that was identified to us and actually was identified to me by constituents in my riding prior to us starting this study was that if you make the decision to use a mail-in ballot, if for some reason you change your mind on that, you can't then show up at the polls. Well, this is a component of that it's talking about that problem and how to remedy that so that people can still have their ballot count if they don't get their mail-in ballots in the timeline that's provided to them. Another piece in here is enshrining in legislation the Vote on Campus program for post-secondary students. We heard from many witnesses, including witnesses from Apathy is Boring, about how important it is that we have the Vote on Campus program. It was so unfortunate to see that not being offered in the last election. We heard about how students are more engaged when they are able to access the ballot more readily on campus, how it's also an opportunity for people in the community to be able to come on campus and to be able to participate in the democratic systems. Mr. Chair, there's parts in here around requiring a report to Parliament by the Chief Electoral Officer on steps needed to give electors the ability to vote at any polling station in their riding by 2029. So again, there are some components in here, and I really wish that we could have an opportunity to talk about them. I'd like to see things being done in a more timely manner. I'd like to see some of those shoulds being turned into musts in this legislation. There are amendments that we've put in. I think there were over 100 amendments that we could be talking about related to this bill to see the improvements required for us to move forward. But they're all very much doable amendments that we could come together and say, yes, we want to make that change and we want to move forward with strengthening our electoral system. And so that's a piece here, the requiring a report to Parliament by the Chief Electoral Officer on steps needed to give electors the ability to vote at any polling station. That's one that we saw in the provincial election in British Columbia that just happened, that people talked about how much they appreciated being able to go to any polling station to cast their ballot. I myself went out the door and all I had to do was look for a sign that said, basically just letting me know that you could vote at that spot. And wherever I was in my community at that time, I just pulled over and voted in the one that suited me. It was very convenient to be able to do so. Introduces new protections against people knowingly making false or misleading statements related to an election or the voting process. Again, we talked about the Conservative robocall scandal already. We talked about the former Conservative member of Parliament that knowingly put forward false information in order to have constituents and Canadians going to the wrong polls in order to see an intended outcome of the election. This has new protections in protecting against that, because I am not optimistic. Unfortunately, it's a sad situation that I am not optimistic that we are going to. That we are not going to continue to see Conservatives pushing out misinformation to see an intended outcome of an election. Now, I'm just looking through all the witnesses that we had here, and I want to also acknowledge the witnesses that we have in front of us today and thank them for their patience, for the expert information that they provided to us today and in previous meetings. I want to empathize with the frustration of us not fully utilizing their skill set and their very valuable time while they're here. And I want to reassure the witnesses that are both here today and have been in previous meetings that my goal is to actually see the vital information that has been provided to us by them actually being used to improve this bill and to see this bill moving forward, rather than to see it all, all of that valuable information just being lost because the Conservatives would rather filibuster and rather use this as an opportunity to fundraise. And so, I want to reiterate how many incredible witnesses we had here today in addition to the people that are here right now. We had witnesses from the Canadian Labour Congress who talked about the positive aspects of this bill, specifically with having the flexibility for workers to be able to get to the polls and to be able to cast their ballots. They also talked about some issues and concerns that they had with the bill, and of course, I have put forward amendments to remedy those concerns. And so, this, again, important information for us to be able to both recognize the strengths of this bill and the necessary improvements on this bill. We heard from the Public Service Alliance of Canada, who also reiterated how important it is that we see Canadians feeling engaged by our democratic systems, that are fully participating in our elections, and that we are reducing barriers for full participation. We had the Canadian Taxpayer Federation, who talked about the concerns of Canadians across the country of this particular part of the bill that speaks to MPs' pensions. And I want to reiterate, when I asked Mr. Terrazzano if this part of the bill, if this particular clause of the bill were to be removed, that no longer provided MPs' pensions that they would not have otherwise received. If that were to be removed, would he have any problem with the bill otherwise? And he made it very, very clear that he did not have any problems with the bill. As a matter of fact, he said he wouldn't be appearing if it wasn't for that piece. I hope I'm not misquoting him, but he said something along those lines. The Canadian Taxpayer Association made it very clear. And the Canadian, I'm so surprised that the Conservatives are not listening to the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and saying that there is no issue if we resolve this particular component of the bill. Well, we have the opportunity to do so today if there is agreement amongst members to bring this to a vote. I'm pretty sure that we can all do that today. Mr. Chair, we had, let me see here, who else did we have here today? We had members from the Privy Council office that were here. We had witnesses from Apathy is Boring, who I spoke about already. We had Samantha Roosh, who was here talking about much of how important it is to have youth engaged in democracy. I believe she also talked about some of her concerns around foreign interference and how important it was that we were addressing that as well. We had lawyer Daniel Mulroy, who was here speaking on behalf of Dean Stacey, who's a visually impaired disability rights advocate who provided incredible information to the committee. I believe it was through Mr. Stacey that he provided us with a letter, everybody on this committee, a letter around how important it is that we move forward with telephone voting and how much of a difference this would make both for his ability to fully participate in our democratic systems, but also for others who may have visual impairments or other barriers in being able to cast their ballot. And instead of us moving forward with these amendments to be able to see this work happen, we are seeing filibusters by Conservatives to secure their own pensions. So there you have it. We had the Indo-Caribbean Educators Network, and I want to speak to the fact that the Indo-Caribbean Educators Network talked about the importance of us acknowledging Diwali, which again, I believe I have said this in this committee before. I completely understand how important it is that we are looking at implications on religious holidays. I believe that is a component for us to look at. I hear the frustrations around that. It's just a situation where we see that there are challenges with every proposed date around that time. Anyways, I agree that it is something that we need to talk about. The frustrating thing is that now the Conservatives have attached MP pensions to the conversation, and I think we definitely need to be having as a committee around how do religious holidays play into decisions of decisions like this? How do they coincide with one another, and what are the best steps for us to move forward with on those? Now, Mr. Chair, I'm just looking to see, we had the Office of the Chief Electoral Officer here. We had, Michael Powell from the Faculty of Law. I could go on, Mr. Chair, with how many people we have had come to this committee who took their time. They have busy lives. They are doing important work, and they took the time to provide us with expert witness testimony, testimony based on lived experiences, testimony based on expert opinion, and provided us with important information that both reinforces the important parts of this bill and provides us with an opportunity to strengthen the parts where the mark may have been missed. Now, this is, again, Mr. Chair, part of the process of how we move legislation through to be passed. This is a government bill that has now come to committee for committee members to provide input based on witness testimony. So this is the time for us to be able to express. I really do hope that we get to a place where we can consider conservative amendments if there are any outside of playing filibuster games around the pension piece so they can maintain their pensions. And so I hope that we could really dig into this. I really appreciate these important debates that we have, even when we have differing opinions. I know that the NDP and Bloc don't see eye to eye on everything, and we see eye to eye on other things. I want to hear from the Bloc and hear about what those concerns are and hear about where we come together. I want to hear from the Liberals what concerns they have, and I do want to hear from the Conservatives what concerns they have. What I definitely am tired of, to be honest, is the record player going over and over again with the exact same narrative over and over, which has no value to this committee whatsoever. And the only intention is to filibuster, to fundraise, and to divide Canadians with misinformation. It's not the way that I would hope that members of Parliament would act in these committees. So it appears I've really nailed the disappointed mom. I've had many years to work on the disappointed mom, and because I am very disappointed, Mr. Chair. And my 21-year-old now and my 17-year-old, they would tell you that they've heard me go on this way. They've seen this face before, and they would probably make fun of me for it. But you know, what else are we left to do but to be disappointed when we're being held hostage by a party who's refusing to do the work to resolve an issue that is so easily resolved? The solution is right in front of us. If the Conservatives didn't vote against the unanimous consent motion that I put forward to see this resolved once and for all, this would be solved already. We could be giving the gift to Canadians across the country of giving them the peace of mind of knowing that this is no longer part of this bill and the issue is resolved because of the fact that us as members of Parliament believe in resolving issues, that we're not going to play politics, that we're not going to look at the best interest of members of Parliament, that we're going to do what is right for Canadians. And again, I will reiterate that I actually think that us talking about MP pensions could be an important discussion for us to have. Do I think it's an important discussion for us to have right now? No. Canadians are struggling to make ends meet. The cost of groceries is increasing. Housing is unaffordable. It is not the time for us to be talking about our own MP pensions. But I can assure you, if we are going to talk about our pensions, I am going to push for it to be done in a transparent way, so that Canadians know what we're talking about, so that the debate is happening publicly, and that Canadians understand the rationale behind decisions that are being made. And again, so that it's not being added into an existing bill. It is a really unfortunate situation that this has been added on here, because it's completely detracted from all of the important work, all of the important witness testimony that we have received. And instead, the Conservatives continue to say over and over that this is nothing but an MP pension bill. My gosh, if I hear that one more time, I mean, I don't understand how saying something over and over again suddenly makes it fact. I have pages upon pages upon pages in front of me, Mr. Chair, that shows all of the different components of this bill. To oversimplify and say that this is only an MP pension bill, I don't know what possible explanation there could be for that. Have they not seen the entire bill? Has nobody presented them? I mean, I know it's available to all of us as members of Parliament. Have they not sat down to actually read through the bill? If they have read through the bill, I don't understand how the Conservatives can say that this is only a pension bill. Also, if they have read through the bill, I would love to talk about some of the other concerns that they might have around the bill. Perhaps there are more, but I haven't had a chance to hear any of them. I haven't had a chance to hear any concerns that they have, to be able to use the experts that we have in the room today to be able to come together with a solution. Maybe it means us taking a piece out of the bill. Maybe it means editing the bill. Maybe it means adding something to the bill to further clarify. There's lots of things that we can do in this bill if the Conservatives have concern. Once again, I'm open to that discussion, because not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's my job. It's my job to sit at this table and talk about the bill and to come forward with solutions. And so my hope, Mr. Chair, I wish that there was a way that I could force us to a vote right now. And there's not. It's a very unfortunate situation that I can't. I will say that the unanimous consent motion that I put forward, calling on the Conservatives to resolve this issue once and for all, they voted against it. I can assure you, if this went to a vote, we would see the exact same outcome again. And so, with that, as soon as I stop talking, I will hear another sub-amendment that'll probably have another B or 3 or C or D that specifies some random language that not a single Canadian, maybe some lawyers, I don't know, if they're going to put forward another sub-amendment, I would appreciate hearing how it's different than the previous sub-amendments. I appreciate my colleague MP Turnbull bringing that forward, because I also had that same question. I'd like to understand what is the actual intention of it, other than to filibuster and to get good clips for fundraising. I would like to have a clear understanding of what it is that they're proposing and why, and can assure the Conservatives that every step of the way, their intentions now are being watched. And so I want them to be aware that they're not fooling anybody with what they're doing. Canadians know. Canadians know that they are trying to waste our time and to fundraise for themselves and to pad their own pockets with their own MP pensions. And so I'm sorry, but it's the truth. Sometimes the truth hurts. When the evidence and the facts are in front of you, what else am I left to conclude? When I know, and I can feel the responses behind me, I'm sorry if that's hurting somebody's feelings, but right now we have members of Parliament from the Conservative Party who are refusing to resolve this issue when they are the ones that stand to benefit the most. So what am I left to conclude? Canadians can decide for themselves. And with that, I look forward to hearing their next sub-amendment that will waste our time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Ms. Barron. I was having flashbacks to many moments of disappointed mom in my childhood, so I appreciate you drawing reference to that. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Barron really has difficulty following the facts and basic logic when she asserts one of the most absurd things I think I've heard in 9 years of sitting in the House of Commons, and that is that somehow Conservatives are determined to pad their pockets with pensions in respect of this bill. She acts as though she and the NDP are bystanders in all of this, but on her point, how is it possible that she can assert that when this very week the House of Commons voted on a Conservative non-confidence motion in this government to call an immediate election?
Exactly.
The motion incorporated, in fact, the very words of her leader that said, among other things, Singh said that the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Those words were put right in the Conservative non-confidence motion.
Point of order.
Okay.
I don't want a point of order.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, but we are talking about NDP 2, and this is in relation to the election date, so I would just ask that we stay on topic of that. Thank you.
No.
I hear your feedback, Ms. O'Connell, and I'm going to just keep an ear open. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours.
Well, Mr. Chair, Ms. Barron, I was allowed a fair bit of leeway. I respected that leeway, and I think it's appropriate that I should be able to respond to the absurd points that she made. And to that end, she made the assertion that Conservatives somehow secretly want this pensions clause to be maintained in the bill, except for the fact that we moved a motion of non-confidence in this government that would have the effect of dissolving Parliament and going to an immediate election. The motion incorporated the very words of her leader. Her leader demonstrated once again that he's a total sellout, that his words mean absolutely nothing, that he has no principles, and we know why, and that is because he wants his $2.3 million pension.
Point of order.
And
Point of order.
Ms. Barron, on a point of order.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Again, I just want to, I think that the member may need some facts provided around the fact that I think he's flipped the pensions of his leader of the Conservative Party and the leader of the NDP Party. Clearly, those numbers don't add up. So I would love if somebody could provide my Conservative member with some facts and some numbers.
For your input,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Barron, that is wading into debate, but appreciate your intervention. Mr. Cooper, go ahead.
we then moved a motion, rather not a sub-amendment, at the last meeting of this committee to see that there is an election, a fixed election date, that is moved up, not back, moved up to February 24, 2025. Hardly consistent with some sort of a plan for Conservatives to secure their pensions, quite the opposite of that. And we moved another sub-amendment forward to provide for an election on February 24, 2025, or within 50 days of the legislation coming into force. Again, hardly consistent with her claim that Conservatives somehow want their pensions, want to delay the election. No, we don't want to delay the election. We want an election, and we want an election now, or at the very least as soon as possible. We want one now, but of course, she voted in the House of Commons to vote confidence in this government, to backtrack on her leader's words. She voted against our sub-amendment to move the date of the election to February 24th, 2025, which happens to be the day before her leader, Jagmeet Singh, qualifies for his $2.3 million pension. I presume she was taking his orders to vote against that sub-amendment because Jagmeet Singh, on the one hand, professes to lack confidence in these Liberals, but at every opportunity, he votes with them. He votes with them to prop them up. Why? Well, very conveniently, it seems because he wants his $2.3 million pension, and a fixed election date on February 24th would have gotten in the way of that. Today, once again, Ms. Barron joined her coalition, well, I guess was directed by her coalition masters to vote against the Conservative amendment to also see that there was an election at the earliest opportunity. So I underscore that the position of the Conservative Party is that time is up with this NDP Liberal government. We want this government to just stop the inflationary spending, stop the tax hikes, stop the crime, stop it all, get on with it, and call and put it to the people of this country and see what they have to say. And I have a feeling it's not going to be very kind to Justin Trudeau or to the sellout leader of the NDP. And Ms. Barron acts as though she and the NDP are bystanders in all of this, except for the fact, and she cited CTV as an accurate source of news. Well, I have a CTV article in front of me from January 27th, 2024, in which the then NDP Democratic Reform critic, Daniel Blaikie, is quoted as saying that a fair amount of work done towards what is or what became Bill C-65. The headline from CTV in January was that Trudeau and Singh's teams were quietly planning this legislation. We know that when the bill was, we know that there were secret meetings between Daniel Blaikie, between officials within the NDP executive director, and the minister, Minister LeBlanc, Parliamentary Secretary Jennifer O'Connell, members from the PMO, PCO, etc. And we, of course, saw Daniel Blaikie standing behind Dominic LeBlanc at the press conference announcing this bill that very conveniently moved the date of the next election back to secure the pensions, of course, of soon-to-be-defeated NDP and Liberal MPs. Now, Ms. Barron asserts that this was all inadvertent. It was just by happenstance that that particular date was selected. Well, give me a break. Give Canadians a break. It's patently absurd. It took us $5. It took me all of a few moments upon opening up the bill to see what the effect of the change in the election date is. Within minutes, it was apparent to me that the date had been moved back by a week, which suddenly made soon-to-be-defeated Liberal and NDP MPs who don't qualify for their pension on the current fixed date who would now qualify for their pension. It's hardly rocket science. It was there right upon looking at the bill. So for the NDP to pretend that their co-author of the bill had no idea, didn't even cross his mind, is absurd. And that absurdity is underscored by the excuses that have been offered by the Liberals and the NDP. The first justification was that this date had been pushed back so as to not conflict with Diwali and the municipal election scheduled in my province of Alberta. But then when the electoral officer came here, he was asked, because he had meetings with the minister along with the NDP, and he was asked, and I'm going to get to that, the NDP and the Liberals met with the chief electoral officer, and we put it to the chief electoral officer, did the question of Diwali come up in conversation at any of those meetings? And he answered in the negative. Now, if this was such a pressing issue, you would think that it would be part of the discussion with the chief electoral officer, but it wasn't. Well, I guess I understand why, because it had nothing to do with Diwali, nothing to do with the Alberta municipal election, and everything to do with Liberals and NDP MPs padding their pockets on their way out the door, when they're shown the door by their voters, whenever the Prime Minister has the guts to call an election, or whenever the sellout leader of the NDP has the fortitude to vote non-confidence in this costly and corrupt government that he has been complicit in propping up and supporting every step of the way, including now 3 times after he ripped up his coalition agreement on the eve of a by-election in Winnipeg, before he taped it back together and continues to sell out everyone.
We want to get
now, so they said Diwali. They said Diwali, but it never came up. They were asked, well, why not, instead of moving the election back, move the election ahead a week? They said, well, that's problematic because it conflicts with Thanksgiving. Okay, I get that. I don't want an election during Thanksgiving weekend. But what is to say about moving it ahead by another week? Well, the excuse they offered was, well, it would conflict with Labor Day and the end of summer, except for the fact that it was perfectly fine for the Prime Minister to have an election that was called in the middle of August that conflicted with Labor Day in 2021, when he called an election to cover up the national security breach that occurred under his government's watch at the Winnipeg lab. And so there is every excuse that they have offered doesn't add up. And when they speak about conflicting with a municipal election, well, the date that they selected happened to conflict with a territorial election. That is what the NDP and Dominic LeBlanc cooked up, is a date that conflicts with the territorial election in Nunavut. Now, if in fact one of the key issues, one of the key reasons, is to avoid a conflict with an election in another province, then wouldn't you think it would be one of the first things that would be done in selecting another date to see whether that date conflicts with any other election? Of course, that's what would be done, but of course that wasn't the intent, that wasn't the reason for why the date was moved back. They thought that they could just sneak this in so that Liberal and NDP MPs could succeed in securing their pensions, and for them to be acting and speaking in a sanctimonious fashion in the face of this, and to say that they're offering solutions. Well, they're the problem. They created this mess. They created this problem. And our position very clearly is, time's up. Let's get on with it. And Ms. Barron spoke about the motion that we had put forward on November 26th to see that all of the communications between the Prime Minister's office, the Prime Minister's department, the Chief Electoral Officer, the Minister of Public Safety, Democratic Institutions, and Intergovernmental Affairs, with NDP party representatives, be produced so that we can determine whose idea it was to push back the date of the next election. It's very interesting that when that motion was put forward on November 26, the Liberals, along with Ms. Barron, following the wishes or demands of her coalition masters, the Liberals, prevented that motion from going to a vote. So she says
Point of order.
she's very supportive of
Point of
that
order.
motion. So
Sorry, Mr. Cooper, I have a point of order. Ms. Barron?
Thank you, Chair. As much as I don't want to give my colleague a break because he's clearly on a rant here, I was asking, can I get clarification around the facts of what was just said? I believe I made it quite clear that I was in support of the motion, and then the motion suddenly was no longer on the table. And so I'm not sure what that
Ms. Barron, we're
sorry. Okay.
yeah, that's
just
okay.
some clarification.
Well, I'd be happy.
It's up to Mr. Cooper to decide if he'd like to speak to that, because it isn't
I'd be
it isn't
very-
something we can do off a point of
be
order.
very happy to remind Ms.
Mr.
Barron
Cooper,
that she ran out the
Mr.
clock to
Cooper?
prevent
Mr.
that
Cooper?
motion from going to a vote.
Just to be a stickler for the rules, if you could just make sure I return the floor to you before you continue. The floor is yours, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe Ms. Barron needs to be reminded that she ran out the clock to prevent that motion from going to a vote, but I'll give her another opportunity. I'll give her an opportunity right now, and therefore I move that the committee proceed to consideration of the motion considered on November 26th.
Okay, just one moment, okay? Okay, so colleagues, just to clarify what's happened here for everybody, Mr. Cooper has moved to resume debate on his previous motion. This is a dilatory item. The reason for that is because it seeks to move us to a new order of business. So there's no debate that can ensue. I'm going to ask the clerk to call the vote.
So, Mr. Turnbull,
Yes.
Ms. Romanado,
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell,
Yes.
Madame Fortier,
Oui.
Monsieur Drouin,
En faveur.
Monsieur Berthold,
Oui.
Mr. Calkins,
Yes.
Mr. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Duncan,
Yes.
Madame Gaudreau,
Oui.
Ms. Barron, Ms. Barron,
Oh, wait for it. Yes, as well. Oh.
11 yeas, 0 nays.
Mr. Turnbull?
Do I have the floor after the vote?
We're on, it's
So-
resumption.
So,
Just one sec. Just one sec. Okay. So because we are moved to a new item, then there is a new list that becomes established as a result of that. So I had Mr. Turnbull who indicated that he would like to speak.
so thank you very much. So I understand that I have the floor, which is great, and I wanted to speak to this. This is a motion that Mr. Cooper has asked us to resume debate on, which we agreed with. And it's because, I think what's interesting about this motion is that it brings up, an important topic that the Conservatives seem to want to get documents on. I think for us, we're sort of interested as well in terms of adding to this motion. So I want to move an amendment and then speak to an amendment to this motion. So in terms of the amendment, I would add Clause D, given that Bill C-65 is intended to strengthen the Canada Elections Act from attempts of foreign interference in Canada's elections, and given the recent allegations, that agents of the Indian government interfered in the 2022 leadership race of the Conservative Party of Canada, the committee invite the following individuals to appear before the committee on its study of Bill C-65. Number 1, Patrick Brown, Mayor of Brampton. Number 2, Dan Moyes, MP
Mr.
for
Turnbull.
Flamborough.
I'm sorry to interrupt, and you're welcome to start again, but just while you're in the process of reading the motion, it would be very helpful to the committee if you could send that
Yes.
to the clerk in both official languages so that it can be distributed. So feel free to begin where you'd like, but the clerk has informed me that she doesn't have that yet. So if you can instruct your staff, please, to get that as soon as possible so that members can follow.
I believe they've heard you, and it will be sent momentarily.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull.
Thank you,
the floor
sir.
is yours.
Yes, so I'll start from the top in terms of the list of witnesses that we would like to have included here. Number 1, Patrick Brown, Mayor of Brampton. Number 2, Dan Moyes, MP for Flamborough Glanbrook. Excuse me. Number 3, the Honourable Michelle Rempel-Garner for Calgary Nose Hill. Number 4, Kyle Seaback, MP for Dufferin-Caledon. Number 5, Doug Shipley, MP for Barrie Springwater Oro Medonte. Number 6, Jaskaran Sandhu, campaign manager, one of the campaign managers for Patrick Brown. And then Harkarat Singh, the other campaign manager for Patrick Brown. So now I want to speak to this for a few moments just to motivate committee members on why I think that they should vote for this amendment.
Sorry, Mr. Turnbull, I've got a point of order. Who is it from, Mr. Duncan?
A very basic decency that this is not Mr. Turnbull's first meeting. We need to wait to get the motion. So
Yeah, I don't.
Suspend until we get that and speak to it. Please.
In fairness to the committee, I don't disagree with Mr. Duncan. It has been my practice when members have read motions that have not yet been distributed that I suspend in order to allow an opportunity for review. So I'm going to suspend. Official languages. We're going to resume debate. Just for clarity, we are now debating an amendment to Mr. Cooper's motion. Mr. Turnbull, the floor is yours.
Appel au règlement, Monsieur le Président.
On a point of order, Mr. Berthaud?
Oui.
Go ahead, Mr. Chair. I just received the amendment from my colleague, Mr. Turnbull. I'm reading it as I speak, but it's clear to me that this amendment is out of order given the motion back in November, which pertains to C-65 and which refers to documents that were discussed and were produced in the case of discussion around Bill C-65, and I don't see in this a moment put forward by my colleague the relevance of this motion and its relevance to the last amendment we discussed. So Mr. Chair, I would ask that you rule this motion for the reasons I explained. I would ask that you rule it to be inadmissible.
Order?
Yeah, Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you. Well, the Conservative motion is speaking in fact, the language is identical if you look at the motion and the amendment, in that this is a motion on C-65, which within C-65 there are provisions and amendments dealing with foreign interference. So while the Conservatives might be asking questions about documents, within their request of documents on C-65, which is broad of the entire bill, there could be conversations around the development of C-65 dealing with foreign interference. They do not target their questioning or their document production specifically to the date of the election. They ask for everything, which means that includes foreign interference, which is a key component of this bill. And the language of the amendment is the exact same in terms of the calling of the witnesses as their first clauses. So unfortunately, they didn't limit the scope to the election date. They have the scope for the entire C-65, which includes foreign interference.
Okay, thank you, Ms. O'Connell. On the same point of order, I've got Ms. Barron.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate my colleagues' comments. First of all, I do appreciate that this is an example of how we bring forward strengthened amendments that are more holistic in nature. I agree with the first amendment that was brought forward. I think that this addition makes the amendment, or the motion, excuse me, even stronger. I think these are all very relevant points if we're talking about transparency of documents, of transparency of information.
So, Ms. Barron, not to cut you off, but if I may, I feel prepared to rule on this. So I've heard the arguments made. I see no reason as to why this is not admissible, which I think is what you're getting at. So for the benefit of the committee, I would like to keep going, but did you have something to add, Ms. Barron, that would be...
I'm just going to ask to be added to the speaking list then on the next
I have you
stage.
on the speaking
Thank
list.
you so much.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, colleagues, my ruling on this is that it is admissible. Mr. Duncan?
Sorry, I was going to get on the speaking list, but...
Yeah, Monsieur le
This-
Président.
this-
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said, Mr. Chair. You said it's admissible or inadmissible?
It is admissible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So-
So,
so
Mr. Duncan asked me to confirm the speaking order, and the speaking order...
Challenging your decision, Mr.
Okay, I have a challenge of my decision. So, colleagues, this goes right to a vote. Reminder that what we are voting on right now is whether or not my decision from a moment ago that rules the amendment to Mr. Cooper's motion admissible should be overturned. I've ruled it's admissible. Monsieur Berthoud has chosen to challenge the chair. We go right to a vote on that. Madame Clerk.
That the decision of the chair be sustained. Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Madame Romanado.
Yes.
Ms. O'Connell.
Yes.
Madame Fortier.
Oui.
Monsieur Drouin.
En faveur.
Monsieur Berthold.
Non.
Mr. Calkins.
No.
Mr. Cooper.
No.
Mr. Duncan.
No.
Madame Gaudreau.
Oui.
Ms. Barron.
Yes.
Okay, so colleagues, I think the vote there was clear. So we're resuming debate. Mr. Duncan did ask for a confirmation of the speaking order. The speaking order changes, of course, because we are on the amendment. I have got Mr. Turnbull, who maintains the floor, followed by Ms. Barron. Should any other members wish to add their names to this list, you can at any moment indicate that. Mr. Duncan, I see you wish to be added, so you would be third in that order. Mr. Turnbull, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And I was on this committee for about 4 years of my political life here on the Hill, and we studied foreign interference at length. And I'm very proud of the work that our government has done to prevent against foreign interference. And I think C-65 actually tries to do more in this area. But what really concerns me is that the Conservative Party of Canada knows full well that there was foreign interference in their leadership race. The current committee for parliamentarians that it was formed by our government, NSICOP, has members from the Conservative Party on it. At least one. We had Alex Ruff at this committee speaking to his private members bill not so long ago, and where he actually said that all members of parliament should be required to get a security clearance, which is really interesting and slightly ironic, if not hypocritical, given the fact that the Conservative leader is the only leader, only federal party leader to not get a top secret security clearance, while knowing full well that within his party and within his leadership race that there was foreign interference. So the NSICOP report alleges that there was Indian government interference in the Conservative Party leadership race. I've cited this report and tweeted about it numerous times because I'm deeply concerned, as the Conservatives were concerned back when Han Dong, there were intelligence leaks that the Conservatives quickly jumped on to have Mr. Dong, questioned in committee to undertake studies on foreign interference here. They took that matter very seriously at that time because it was a Liberal member of Parliament whose name was in question, and yet they show zero concern and zero interest in undertaking the same kind of scrutinizing study and looking deeply. They have lectured us time and time and time again on this quote of sunlight is the best disinfectant, transparency and sunlight is the best disinfectant, but it only applies to everybody else other than themselves. They do not want this. They scrambled in this committee room. We watched them all scramble and huddle up because they were scared like little rats on a ship. And you know what? I watched that happen. And you know what? Why would they be so concerned about their party finally being exposed for the actual foreign interference that's been within their party? Which is interesting because, they show this deep interest and even partisan, when it's in to their partisan gain, they will fake their interest in almost anything. And that's what we've seen in this House of Commons for many, many, many months. So we know that the NSICOP report has cited allegations of Indian government interference in the Conservative Party leadership race. And then just recently, we actually confirmed this. So we've actually now confirmed this. Media reports have confirmed that within Patrick Brown's campaign, and it's interesting because there's things that are connected here which I can't quite figure out what the connections are, but I think Canadians should be deeply concerned. On the one hand, we know that the current leader of the Conservative Party has paid, his campaign actually paid the legal fees for the person who reported allegations against Patrick Brown. So what's interesting is that they paid the legal fees, and that seemed kind of strange. Why would one campaign pay the legal fees of the person that took down the opponent, right? And that's been out there for a long time. So on the one hand, that's the case. And then on the other hand, we hear that the Indian government was actually pressuring MP Rempel Garner to step down from the campaign of Patrick Brown. Why? Because it wasn't in her interest to stay connected with Patrick Brown. So it's almost as if the Indian government knew that Patrick Brown wasn't going to be in the running for much longer, and they were encouraging her to abandon ship because it wasn't good for her political career, which is really interesting. And then we just heard recently when Patrick Brown finally came to our committee, at the SECU committee just recently, and I know my colleague, Ms. O'Connell, was there and questioned Patrick Brown. We heard a number of things, and the media headlines were clear that Patrick Brown actually confirmed that there were angry calls from consular officials. And this is not just confirmed by one person. There's actually 5 people that actually confirmed in Patrick Brown's campaign that they were sources. And they confirmed that there were pressure, that it was well known that there was pressure from the Indian government or Indian consular officials and the consular general for Ms. Rempel Garner to basically abandon ship and remove herself from Patrick Brown's campaign, which is interesting because she actually did remove herself. She subsequently actually said, well, that she was going to or was considering to run in Alberta to replace Jason Kenney shortly after. And then funny enough, she decided not to do that, but never actually went back to Patrick Brown's campaign.
Highly suspicious.
That is highly suspicious, if you ask me. It's really piqued my interest, certainly, and I think all Canadians should be interested, just as they were interested before when in a nomination contest there was questions and allegations of a Liberal member and whether there was any foreign interference in that nomination contest. And the Conservatives were like, I've never seen them so excited and so interested in jumping on this issue at that time, and yet they show no interest when it comes to their own party. Oh, I'm just getting warmed up, Chair.
Mr. Turnbull, the floor certainly is yours, but as you very well know, on a point of order, I do need you to respect my intervention so that
Absolutely,
I can hear the
I
honourable
respect
colleague.
you very much.
Mr. Cooper, on a point of order.
Mr. Chair, I just would seek clarification as to whether it would be in order, since we do have the officials from Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, to ask questions about the NSCOP report, Han Dong's nomination.
Mr. Cooper, I think you're
Mr. Cooper, I need you. And hiding
Mr.
that.
Cooper, I need just as I scorned Mr. Turnbull with a little bit of disappointed dad on not listening to me when I took the floor. I'm going to have to do the same with you, my friend. I have to intervene. This is not.
Asking, is that in order?
You are wading into debate. I don't see anything out of order about what I've heard. Mr. Turnbull, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and I respect your ruling once again. So I think what's also, I think, pertinent for Canadians to be aware of is that when Patrick Brown came for his recent committee appearance, he also indicated that the Poilievre leadership campaign had an incomprehensible, and that's kind of an interesting word that he used. He used the word, and I quote it, incomprehensible number of memberships. And I thought that was interesting, especially when some of their members had put out tweets of images of these vast numbers of membership forms that they were collecting. So I thought that was kind of interesting, too. And so, you know, when you start to sort of look at this picture holistically, you start to connect the dots here, and it's deeply concerning to me. And as I said, you know, we spent many, many, many months. I have 5 binders of material that are about as thick as could possibly fit in a binder on foreign interference. And I remember sitting through hundreds and hundreds of witnesses, and Mr. Cooper was there. I remember him adamantly going on and on about sunlight is the best disinfectant, which is interesting because, again, when it comes to the Conservative Party of Canada, is sunlight still the best disinfection? Okay, great. Well, that's wonderful. I say we study and call all the witnesses then, and I'm sure Mr. Cooper and his colleagues on the Conservative benches will support this motion, or amendment, I should say, to this motion. But I also wanted to talk to the fact that, you know, there's a difference here because when Han Dong's reputation was in question, and maybe I'll just remind everybody before we might run out of time that, you know, when you look at Han Dong's nomination contest, I would say that a leadership candidate like race is exponentially greater. Not that any amount of foreign interference is acceptable in this country at all, and I'm not suggesting otherwise, but the severity of the impact, the gravity of the situation that Canadians should be deeply concerned about when it comes to the leadership race of the leader of the official opposition, that there was confirmed in an NSICOP report instances of foreign interference that have now been confirmed, should be deeply concerning to all Canadians.
So with that, colleagues, we are at 1 o'clock, although we do have the possibility of extra resources. I'm not going to seek them. So I'm going to... we're going to suspend the meeting, and when we return, just for clarity, so that there's no disagreement about this, Mr. Turnbull maintains the floor, followed by Ms. Barron, followed by Mr. Duncan. Meeting is suspended.